Last time we chatted about having enough ideas of who could buy a business that you've got some ideas to choose from. And so, the old saying of we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas isn't going to get us very far. And so we needed some ideas. Now, what are we going to do with them? Um, the first thing is to have some criteria to compare those ideas against. And when you're thinking about finding the buyer for a business, good criteria are, do they have the money to buy it? Another good question to ask is, have they ever bought a company before? Or are you going to have to teach them how to buy a company in general, as well as how to buy your company? But third, maybe most important is, do you think they want to? And like many things in life, asking that question straight up might not be the way to get the best answer. And so when we work with clients and try to help them learn who good prospects are and who's qualified in terms of their interest to buy the company, what the question that we want people to have thought through first, and then to find with our help a way to ask potential buyers is, what could we accomplish together that we can't do alone? We're not trying to ask a yes or no question and get a yes or no answer. We're trying to ask a more complicated question and get people to think. And we think that's the way to begin a negotiation about the terms of a business sale, in a way that you can control how that conversation goes. So after there's a list of ideas, and after internally you've thought about the criteria for ranking your potential prospects, then the next step is to start to make up yourself. Well, what's the story that each of these prospects needs to hear that's going to cause them to think it might be a worthwhile conversation to get engaged with you in, does it make sense to talk about the purchase of a business or the sale of a business or a joint venture? And so what we recommend to people as the second step is develop a story for every prospect. So what's that story then going to be about? It's going to be about how your company, when added to another company, adds new customers, adds new products that their current customers might want, reduces costs, or adds talent to the team. Those are all good reasons for a bigger company or a peer company to want to think through with you what the impact to them might be of adding your company to what they're doing. Now, what's not in that story is, what's the multiple of last year's EBITDA on my standalone business that somebody might pay if they're interested in buying my business. In fact, that's explicitly not part of that story, because buyers don't really buy on the basis of the way that the price is talked about in the market. So many business owners have friends who at the country club sometime have said, well, I sold my company for 20 times last year's earnings, for a 20x multiple. And either they're thinking, how do I get that? Or they're thinking that's where the market is. But the right answer is, that's probably nowhere close to anything true in any repeatable way. And the reasons for that are severalfold. One is, a multiple of last year's EBITDA is a really common way to describe the price after the fact in the sale of a business, but it's not how anybody made the decision. So both the multiple and the thing it was multiplied against, EBITDA usually, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, are negotiated numbers. So someone has negotiated how should they interpret past numbers with the buyer to come up with a number, and then they've negotiated what should the multiple of that number be that sort of makes sense as a way to describe a deal. But when the buyer by themselves was making a decision about what to offer, both overall price and terms, their own discussion probably won, what's my return on investment on whatever money I'm putting out up front? And so what the buyer was doing was saying to themselves, probably without the seller in the room, what can I accomplish when I combine this company I'm looking at buying with my company? What will sales be? What will expenses be? What staffing changes will I need to make? What customers can I get more from if I show up in a cross-selling meeting. What opportunities are there to do something in my marketing that's going to make a big buzz out of this? The discussion internally at the buyer's level was not what happened last year. It was what's going to happen over the next 5 years that's going to make this price make sense. If the question that someone interested in selling a business put to the buyer was, do you want to buy my company or not? You're definitely not going to be in the conversation about what happens after the sale. But if you want to influence what the price is, you have to be in the conversation about what happens after the sale. So what's the question to ask and what's the story to give to a potential buyer? Well, it's not about, do you want to buy my company or not? It's not what's the price as a multiple of last year's earnings that you'll pay. It's what impact would it have on your business if we were to combine what I'm doing with what you're doing? And what could we do in sales together if this were a joint effort and a joint exercise? Or what could we do in expense savings together? Or how could we get the best members from both of our teams to work together effectively so that we're doing something better than either of us could have done alone? If you've got that conversation going, starting by imagining it, then you're in a strong position to be at least influential in the buyer's own conference room when they're having their own meetings about what's the return on investment that I could achieve if I were to buy your company. We joke with clients that when they go to sell their company, they're selling to two people at the same time. One of them is the senior person who's making a decision at the buyer, so probably the president of the buying company. But the other person they're selling to is some junior MBA who's a few years out of school, whose job is to build a spreadsheet model of the deal. And they are by themselves or with their boss's guidance going to put numbers in a spreadsheet for some kind of financial projection. And I'm going to win if I can get that kid to put the right numbers in the spreadsheet, not put the wrong numbers in the spreadsheet. And I'm never, ever, ever going to see that kid's model. But I need to know it's there. And I need to know that I've told a story to the president of the organization that I want to buy my company that's going to be compelling and capture the president's imagination. And I've told a story that's concrete enough that the kid who's building the spreadsheet model is going to put the right numbers in the projection model so that when they have a private discussion about how do we want to do the math for return on equity, more likely than not, they got to what I thought was the right answer. And I won't know for sure, but the way that I will have a pretty good sense is that they come back with the right offer. So as the second step in trying to negotiate the sale of a business from a position of strength, after figuring out some ideas of who the right buyers would be, it's to develop at least a guess at the story that the buyer is going to find compelling about why they ought to do the deal and how much they could accomplish by doing it with you.